you know. And there's something about the autumn that, I don't know, it's sort of a mixture of beauty and sadness, I feel. And this is very relevant to the theme I want to look at today, a mixture of beauty and sadness that comes with this time of the year. There's a sense, isn't there, of decay. There's a sense of the leaves starting to turn, of the flowers finishing and dropping off, of the fruits ripening, all that kind of thing. There's a sense of movement on, but of the leaf mould building up in the forests and in the gardens, and the leaves starting to fall off all the London plains in the streets. You know that, you're looking forward to that bit where you get big drifts of the crispy leaves and you can walk through them with a crunching sound. And also, maybe it's a time of year when you look back as well, and there are feelings that the pandemic things are starting to, as people say, normalise, whatever normal means, and people do look back over it. And one of our team members today was saying how it's her birthday coming up, and looking back over that last year that you do when your birthday comes up, sometimes you think, well, what has happened in that year? What have I really done? Have I really achieved anything? Has anything really shifted? And again, that can be quite a poignant sense of, oh dear, especially during the pandemic, when we've been so restricted and it's been so difficult to sort of even see how our life is going to be going forward in the future. And even for some people, this will generate a sense of anger. I was looking on Twitter, and one tweet, a guy was saying, I feel a year of my life has been stolen. Words cannot convey how angry and cheated I feel. And I think that's another response, in a way, to that sense of things moving on, or of things not being as you want them to be, is that feeling of anger, or perhaps being cheated, which, you might feel, oh, that's a bit of an overreaction, but to respect it, that is a real thing that can happen, that feeling. So all this is to do with impermanence, the sense of decay or regret or anger that comes with impermanence. But there is another side to impermanence. As well as things passing, new things are coming into being. In a way, every autumn is matched by a spring, but that also works on the smaller scale, on the day-to-day scale. New things are coming into being. There are even new things to look forward to, and we do spend a lot of time looking forward to, oh yeah, the weekend's coming up, I'm going clubbing, or oh yeah, I've got a concert coming up, or a holiday, and in my case, I'm moving soon, oh yeah, that would be so exciting. So leaving behind the old place, moving to the new place. So what is really relevant when we take that impermanent sense, when we take it personally rather than in a general sense? We see it in particular from our own point of view as a process of both losing and gaining, gain and loss. And those are the two sides of that coin. So is it possible to come to terms with gain and loss? And this is a really central theme in Buddhism. That's why I wanted to talk about it today. It's a central theme in Buddhism. An impermanence, where it comes from and what it means, that was you could say the great or a great realization of the Buddha before he started Buddhism, and that made him start Buddhism. So I on the way here, I went to the rose bush outside the Buddhist community where I live, and I picked these 3 roses. So one is a bud just opening, one is fully out, and then that is that still a rose? What is it now? Hasn't turned into a rose hip yet. Interesting. So impermanence is the first of one of these Buddhist lists, and it's the first of the 4 seals, the 4 mudras in Buddhism. And my topic this morning is that first seal. But I'll just give you a little brief introduction to all 4 of them, because they are so central to Buddhism. The 4 seals, there are 4 sort of guarantees or hallmarks of what is authentically Buddhist, particularly for the Tibetans. And there's quite a fun book here by Dzongpa Jamyang Khyentse Rinpoche, who's a Tibetan Buddhist teacher, called What Makes You Not a Buddhist? And that's the theme of this book, is looking at the Four Seals. And he's saying, you're not a Buddhist if you don't take them seriously. Take them seriously, then you can be a Buddhist. Not that you have to be a Buddhist, I mean, that's up to you. They do actually go back to very early Buddhism, and I want to give you a quote from the Pali Canon, which is the oldest collection of Buddhist teachings. And I find it amazing looking at the Pali Canon to know that these are records of things that people said 2,500 years ago. And we're so lucky with that. I was thinking in this country, you do some archaeology and you can find amazing things. You know, people find graves and old helmets and swords and flint hand axes. But the actual words of people in those days have been lost. That seems so tragic to me, that the people who lived around here, this was a road in Roman times, you know, but the people who lived by that road, we don't know who they were or what they said. But in India, at least in Buddhist India, they had this tradition of memorizing important things that people said. So we do actually have these amazing records. And I'm going to give you one of these. So listen carefully to this and see what you think. I've sort of tried to modernize the language, because sometimes when you read the translations, it's very stilted and Victorian. So whether or not there's a Buddha around, this always stands. A reliable reality, a harmony of truth. That is, all processes are impermanent and so cannot satisfy you. And all experiences have no you experiencing them. What a Buddha does, what an awakened one does, is to directly wake up to that and break through to that. Then he or she describes it, affirms it, and teaches it. He or she brings it to light, explains it, and makes it plain. All processes are impermanent and so cannot satisfy you. All experiences have no you experiencing them. So I don't know if this includes all four of the Four Seals in that teaching, which I'll explain in a second, but I'll just repeat it again. Whether or not there's a Buddha around, this always stands, a reliable reality, a harmony of truth. All processes are impermanent and so cannot satisfy you. All experiences have no you experiencing them. What a Buddha does is to directly wake up to that and break through to that. Then he or she describes it, affirms it, and teaches it. He or she brings it to light, explains it, and makes it plain. All processes are impermanent and so cannot satisfy you. All experiences have no you experiencing them. So this is the four. There's impermanence is the first. The second is unsatisfactoriness. The issue of where does true satisfaction come from? Can it really come from processes and things that we're experiencing, or is it something we have to generate inside? All experiences have no you experiencing them. That is the emptiness of self, which I won't say any more about now, but we'll have a talk on that later in the autumn. And then finally, the possibility of Buddhahood, of realizing that, of really waking up to that. Nirvana alone is peace, is the way it's sometimes put. So those are the Four Seals. They're marks of authenticity. The word is mudra, which is also used for a gesture, which is really nice. The gesture of meditation that the Buddha statue has is called a mudra. But here it means a seal, like when you get one of those things that you press into the wax. Oh yeah, good, that is authentically Buddhist. Or, you know, on a piece of silver, you get a hallmark, don't you? So, oh yeah, this is genuine silver, sterling silver. And the Tibetans phrase them like this. First of all compounded factors are impermanent. Secondly, all contaminated, corrupt, or stained things are suffering. And then thirdly, all things are devoid of any perduring self. Perduring, that's an unusual word, isn't it? But I think it just means sort of not changing. Fourthly, nirvana is peace. Okay, so the first one of these, that's what we're going to look at today. And I hope you find this of interest. And we'll have a chance, I hope, at the end for a few questions. So to bear that in mind, think, hang on a minute, don't get that. Or, no, that can't be right. Then feel free to ask at the end. And we'll carry on exploring this for the next few weeks. So I just wanted to give you a very easy example. Yeah. So I'm going to light this match. So here, I hope you can see this online, but you can have to guess if you can't quite see it. So here is a match, a flame on a match. It's a really obvious example of impermanence, it seems to me, watching this flame. You can see it, you can identify it, you can name it, you can give it a word. In a way, it's a thing, but in a way, it has no stability at all. It's constantly changing. It's ungraspable, literally ungraspable. If I try to grasp it, it'll just go out. And once the match is burnt down, which it nearly has to my finger, or if I do that with it, the flame is gone. It's just gone. Where's it gone? Where has it gone? The flame is gone. So I guess you could say maybe not a thing, maybe a process. The flame, the flaming match, the burning match with the flame on it is a process. But what about the flowers? What about those? So is that a thing? Is that the flower, the bud, the budding bud, the fully blown flower, the old one? Are they things? They're clearly, again, they're a really good example of impermanence, aren't they, flowers? If you arrange them, you know they're not going to. You put the little sachet of flower food in and you hope that they won't fade too soon, but after a while the petals start dropping off, they go brown, the water starts to smell. So they're a great example of impermanence. They do seem more definite than the match. But I imagine if you filmed it on your phone or something, but like where you could actually take a shot every minute or something over a week, and then you play it fast. What you'd see would be very like the flame. It would sort of shift and change and almost melt and change colour, and the petals would go bling, bling, they'd fall off one by one, and then it would change, maybe into the berry. Maybe rotting, falling into the soil, until it was indistinguishable from earth. You think, is there a flower there in that earth? It's amazing, really. And then what about me and you? What about our bodies? And this maybe is the most both frightening and striking example of impermanence is me. Now I'm in my 60s, and I can very easily watch gradually. If you look at the back, I don't know if you can see it, but if you look at the back of my hands, I'm getting liver spots. That's a real mark of aging, isn't it? There's probably hardly anyone here who's old enough to know what that is like, but it's like these little brown spots start to appear on the back. God, yeah, and the hair, and it's going greyer and whiter and so on, The skin is sort of sagging. So if you imagine that I took a film of me, and maybe over a longer period than the flowers, maybe over the whole of that 60 years, and then there'll be a lot of flickering as I sort of move around doing things. But if you could just take still shots, you can see a few of these online, can't you, where you look at somebody's face over many, many years, and you see the aging process. And, more and more health issues come up as you get older. And one day, into the soil, like the flower, dead. Extraordinary, really. And I suspect that same process may well apply to you as well as to me. And even more solid things, like you think of this building here that we're in at the moment. It's built of concrete and brick and steel, but we know that one day this will be rubble, just rubble. And probably a new and a different building will go up in its place. So is there anything which is not impermanent, which is not transient? Well, I'll just throw something in. What about abstract ideas? What about love or truth or something like that? So you could think about that. I'll leave you to think about that, whether they are not really impermanent or whether they are. But really, in terms of our experience, the whole of our life, the whole of our experience is a flow. It's a process or many processes. And what I want to talk about, as I mentioned earlier, in particular, is gain and loss, because those are the things that stand out to us, it seems to me. When you take impermanence seriously, you realise that you try to hold on to something, and at first you've got it, you've gained it, and then after a while, like the flowers, you've lost it. You don't have it anymore. And gain is usually welcome, and loss is usually unwelcome. But Buddhism would say that change, all this change, is what makes it possible for us to fulfill our potential. If impermanence wasn't there, we would be stuck. And at first we might think, oh good, I'm going to be eternally youthful. I'll always have the same job and the same salary. And do we really want that? Do we really want everything to stay the same, even if it's good? So we must allow things to pass. We must accept losing things so that we can genuinely gain, and not just gain in general, not just gain possessions or status or something, but gain wisdom, and a wisdom that rides the waves of change. If you imagine a champion surfer riding the wave, if the surfer stops, that's it, they've sunk. They have to swim back to the shore. You've got to ride that wave of change, but also not to go too fast, not get ahead of it. So I'm inviting you in a way just to consider this. What would it mean if you took this seriously? Are there any ways where we don't really take it seriously? Are there any ways where we try to pretend that impermanence is not a reality, or that we find it threatening or worrying? And it's good to just be obvious about that. And I think one of the ways of doing this is simply to bring impermanence to mind. And Gukyosaki was leading a beautiful meditation earlier on, in which that impermanence of the breath and of the flow of the states of mind is such an obvious and immediate example of impermanence. Every breath is a gaining, as we breathe in, it's a losing in a way as we breathe out. And we can just watch that reality, can't we? And we can't stop it. We must go with that flow, as they say, go with the flow of it. And the same goes for our states of mind, our mental states. But you could also look at natural things. We've talked about vegetation, but what about the clouds? On the recent weekend retreat we had, we did this cloud watching exercise, where you just see the shifting clouds and you see your tendency. Oh, I can see something in that. That's definite. Yeah, that's a little rabbit. Oh yeah, with the ears. And then 5 minutes later, oh, it's gone. I've lost it. What's happened to the poor little rabbit? Clouds are a great example. I suggest you do this as a real thing. Sit outside and just watch the clouds. Music is a fantastic example of impermanence. So it's almost as if the very beauty of music is because of the way it shifts, because of the way it changes. And you can't try and statically stay with the first chord. You've got to let the chord develop into the next one. You've got to let a tune unfold. And even not just music, just even a single tone. So if I can find the little striker. So if we listen to the gong, I know this sometimes doesn't sound so good online, so I do apologise if you're online, but have a listen to the sound of the gong. Can you still? I love doing this with children when we get them in here, just sort of just return it. Now, put your hand up when you can't hear it anymore. When it's gone. When is it gone? When is it still there? And I think this is probably a reason that gong is used so much in Buddhist meditation, just to have that sense of now. This is now. And I can't hang on to it. I've got to let that sound die away. But then many other things in our lives, just something really poignant sometimes is your parents, just watching your parents, because you may feel that you have a long time to go before you're going to be in that state. And some of you haven't, but for some of us, but our parents, as we watch them getting older, moving maybe for some of us, our parents have died already. Yourself, your face in the mirror, just to really look at that face in the mirror. I went to a beautiful little folk concert last night by a singer called Faye Heald over in the Culpeper Gardens in Islington. And one of the songs that she sang, I've never heard it before, it was about Queen Elizabeth. and how she could not face the mirror, the looking glass that's said in the song. And then, eventually she was able to, as she reflected on her own past and her own self in the little, then eventually she could look in the mirror and say, here I am, Queen Elizabeth, getting old, aging. I mentioned the hand. Sadness, poignancy comes with these things. So how come everything is impermanent? And I guess that here we get into philosophy, which I'm not going to go into. I'm sure some of you may be interested in that. You can sort of read up about it. But it is, again, central in Buddhism. How come things are impermanent? Well, in a way, it's because there aren't any things. That's one way of putting it. We tried to sort of identify that match flame. Is it a thing? How can you put a boundary around it, either in space or in time? It's not. It's something which is constantly interacting. It's consuming the fuel of the match stick itself and the oxygen that's pouring in from the air around it. And those things are combining together and they're producing an incandescent plasma which surrounds the end, where it's full of little tiny particles of carbon, each of them red hot or white hot, giving off light. So it's a process, isn't it? But we want a name for it, and it's fair enough. We want a name. We call it the match flame. But it's not a thing. And so everything is flowing, dancing, and weaving processes. And they weave themselves together to produce the current situation. And this is what's called conditionality from a Buddhist point of view, conditioned arising. So when any of the processes that give rise to this situation, so the matchstick, the oxygen around it, if they change in any way, then the situation itself will change. And they will change. So because everything changes, that means that everything else changes because everything interpenetrates, everything is connected. And that applies to us and our mental states, as well as to the City of London, the whole of humanity, the planet Earth, the universe. So, a flower, I meant to bring this along to show you, but I picked from the garden a courgette. Yeah, so you'll have to imagine it because I forgot to bring it. So I picked a courgette. Now, that was just a little plant. Then it was this big yellow flower with all the bees coming to it. And then it was a sort of little knob of green, and then it's getting longer, and by the time I picked it, maybe it's not a courgette, it's more like a marrow really than a courgette. And then you pick the marrow and you stuff it and you eat it, and then it's turned into you in some sense. So I mean, maybe this is all very obvious. I'm sorry to labour the point, but you see how you can probably see if you think of the courgette, just how many different factors have come together to produce what we think of as a thing. Oh, it's a courgette, I got it from Sainsbury's. Yeah, that's right. I've eaten it, it's gone. So I'm paraphrasing this from a really good Buddhist writer called Bhikkhu Bodhi, an American monk. This is because of conditioned arising. Whatever you notice, it's come into being because all sorts of factors have been brought together to enable it to be there. When those factors are no longer combined in the right way, then it changes into something else, as with the flame of the match. And as soon as we identify or label something, we put a boundary around a little flame or the flowing river of reality. We try to grasp the flame at the end of the match. We try to keep it for ourselves. But then we look closer and we realize that whatever we've labeled comes into being and ceases. There's a constant arising, there's a constant passing into something else, coming into being and ceasing. So, does this need to be a problem? The fact of impermanence, which is there, is so universal. Does it need to be a problem, a difficulty? Just the way things are. But Buddhism says that there is one reason why it does become a problem, and that reason is clinging. So another thing, we're really lucky in London having a garden, and a lot of birds come to the garden, as well as the bees coming to the courgette flowers. And so there's a bird in the garden coming for the crumbs that we put out for the bird, but we tend to cling, we tend to grasp, we tend to hold on. And it's as if we can't open our hands and let it fly away. You may be able to be really lucky and train it so it can land on your finger and take the crumbs from your hand. That's so wonderful. But there's maybe a little part of you that wants to close that fist. And yes, it's my bird. Put it in a cage, sing for me, please. Stroking its little head. This is my precious little robin, I will never lose it. So I'm going to give you another longish quote from the beginnings of Buddhism, looking at this issue of clinging and how it connects with impermanence. And this is the Buddha talking about the danger with respect to impermanence. So once again, remember this is 2,500 years old. I just find it amazing when I think of this in a way. Your body is transient, the Buddha says. Your feelings are transient. Your preferences are transient. Your perceptions are transient. Your habits are transient. Your awareness itself is transient. And what is transient is subject to loss. It's not satisfying if something is transient. If something is transient, unsatisfactory, and unreliable, then you can't justifiably insist, this belongs to me, this is I, or this is my ego. So, this is still the Buddha speaking, think of anything. Think of bodies, think of feelings, perceptions, habits, consciousness or awareness, whether it's inside or outside you, whether it's obvious or subtle, whether it's spiritual or worldly, whether it's far or near, whatever. You should realize with true wisdom that this does not belong to me. This is not I. This is not my ego. And the Buddha goes on to say, imagine looking at the thousands of bubbles on a stream as they race along, watching them, carefully examining them. They appear to be empty, unreal, insubstantial. And in exactly the same way, look at everything that goes on in your body, in your feelings, in your perceptions, in your habits, and in your states of awareness, whether it's of the past or the present or the future, whether it's far or near. Watch them, carefully examine them. They appear empty, they appear open, they appear without an ego. So that's a bit too long for me to repeat that, but I hope you got the gist of that. He goes into another list there, just a way of classifying our experience into the body and the feelings and the perceptions and so on, but which we can go into maybe later on in one of the future weeks here. So he's saying, that is our tendency to grasp, is a tendency to hold on to this, to think that is mine, or that is me, or that idea is mine, that opinion is mine even, it can be, just a little mental state. But then it means that we're subject to losing and gaining. And what is unwelcome is disliked, and thus it's shunned, it's repelled, or avoided, or attacked, or just ignored because it's unwelcome. And the decay and the loss of possessions, the loss of valued things and ideas and people. And this is the whole thing about losing. And according to traditional Buddhism, some people are what they call hate types. And hate types will concentrate specifically on losing. They'll notice endings. They'll notice things ending. And this tends to lead to a very bleak view of life, in which you notice constantly, I'm always losing things. Nothing is right. Nothing is reliable. So therefore I should be completely detached from everything and not be involved and have no love and so on. So to concentrate too much on losing is risky. You need to balance it out. So let's have a look at gaining. So anything that's welcome, any experience that's welcome or a thing that's welcome, we like it. Now that's what it means. We seek it, we crave it, we cling to it. And the greed type of person, as opposed to the hate type of person, concentrates on things arising rather than things ending, concentrates on gaining, notices those things, and therefore tends to become philosophically speaking, an eternalist whose mind is in the future. But can you desperately hang on to something if you know you have to give it up? So it's good just to notice, do I tend to focus more on the losing or more on the gaining, or can I get a balance between the two? Can I gain gratitude for everything I gain? Can I have a sense of openness and letting go to the things that I lose? So you might think that to focus on loss is the most realistic thing to do. Nothing can be relied upon, everything will pass, we should always brace ourselves against disappointment. But no, you might be an optimist rather than that, and for every loss there's a gain, and you might feel this huge gratitude, all the wonderful things that have come to you in your life. And you might say that positive view is surely better. But Buddhism would say, no, it's out of balance. You need to find a balance. Both of these views are one-sided. The world is woven of woof and weft, like in a tapestry, like in a cloth, a loom. And it's a tapestry of strands, and the strands which are arising, and the strands which are passing away, which are ceasing. Threads which are gaining, and threads which are losing. And we can enjoy the whole weave. That's the thing to try and do. Can you enjoy the whole weave? Because that's what existence is. It's made up of both. To concentrate only on gaining leads you to be focused mainly on the future, always looking forward to something better. And this culminates in the religious view of one day we'll all be in heaven. You know, one day we can have a kingdom of heaven on earth or something like that. Focusing on the future, better things. Never appreciating the imperfect vividness of the present moment. But focusing on losing leads to thinking that nothing matters deeply. We can live as we like. Who cares? Who cares whether you're making the world a better place? Who cares whether you're treating people well or badly? Makes no difference. It'll all pass away anyway. So instead of these two one-sided views, Buddhism sees that life can welcome change and can also turn loss into a willingness to let go, and can turn gain into the creating of the future, the creating of particularly a path to enlightenment. So impermanence permits transformation, it allows creativity. And that means that the path is possible. And if you don't have that sense, you're stuck in your old self, there's no hope of release, and this is unbearable, yet still we cling. So habit, the tendency to habit is denying impermanence, is holding on to the familiar. And you can be the victim of change, sloshing about in a stormy ocean, blown this way and that by the reactive mind, by your habitual responses to gaining and losing, or you can be the captain of your ship. And the captain realizes that there are different kinds of change. There's the creative process and there's the reactive process. The creative is where you're mindful of your present experience, you give yourself a space before you react, and you allow the new and richer response to unfold. And in that, you're starting to set up a path for your future. You're climbing the flagpole, as the Zen people put it, climbing the flagpole towards enlightenment. And then you think, oh yeah, I must grow, I need to strive, I need to develop, I need to cultivate my life. But you must never think you've got there. And a Zen master once said, yep, you've got to climb the flagpole. You shin up the flagpole, you've got to the top, what do you do at the top? Does anyone know this old Zen saying? Does anyone know what you do when you get to the top of the flagpole? You might become, what's that? That would be the obvious thing to do, wouldn't it? Slide back down and then start again. Yeah. No, what the Zen master says is, when you get to the top of the flagpole, take another step. I don't know what that means, but there's something in it, isn't there? That's as with all these Zen sayings. So in a way, I think what that does say, in a way, is that you're already there, that your awareness is already perfect. The purity of your actual awareness feels distant, but it is right here with you already. This is the paradox. You have to strive, and you also have to give up striving. You have to be carried along in the stream of the enlightened. And I'm not going to go into that here. I was thinking of talking a bit more about death because death is the big one. It comes to impermanence. And so I would encourage you just to sort of ponder over that. Impermanence means the possibility of creativity, which means a new life. But that also in the moment means dying to your old self. And so death, the reality of death, is in a way a symbol of that constant dying or spiritual death that we need to do. But facing the reality of it. And we even have a saying, another Zen saying from Dogen and from Huineng, which is impermanence is Buddha nature. In other words, impermanence looks like the problem, but in the end it turns out to be what enlightenment is. Enlightenment isn't a state, it's not a thing, it's not a person, it's not a Buddha. It is the flow. It is the impermanence. Okay, I'm just going to finish now, I think. So we looked at the Four Seals, and you may or may not remember this, but you'll see it. It's on the website, and we'll go into the other seals during the autumn. The first one being impermanence. The second one being the unsatisfactoriness that comes from clinging, the problems that come from clinging. The third one being the emptiness of self. And the fourth one being nirvana is peace, or the possibility of waking up fully. Those are the four seals we'll be looking at. And today I was looking at impermanence, at transience, at the issues of gain and of loss, of the cyclic, the reactive process that we can use with change, where we're just stuck in our habits, or the creative process where we can die to the old self and move into something new. So I looked at all those different things. And I want to finish by just saying there are a number of meditations you can do around impermanence, a number of reflections you can do, and maybe some of these we'll do over the next few weeks. First of all, just look at your state of mind, and this can be good to reflect at the end of the day. Look back over the day and reflect on the changes in your state of mind, the shifts, the moods that you've been through. What has been uppermost in your mind? What's been preoccupying you? In a way, what's the mental weather been during the day? And that can be a wonderful thing to do. And you may think, oh no, I just want to go to sleep and forget about today. It was terrible. But no, it wasn't all terrible. It was up and down, lots of things happening. Or another way to reflect on impermanence is sounds. Listening to sounds is the most vivid example of impermanence. Even listening to conversations, how the words in conversations appear for a fraction of a second and produce their image in your mind, and then they vanish. They fluctuate. Or you can just do it with your senses, everything that passes through your senses. Sit in the park and let the universe flow around you, and then participate in that flow. Mental events in meditation, notice all the subtle arisings and passings away in the flow of your experience. Everything in your experience, the bodily, Gikisaki really brought this in very well in the meditation. Your body, experience, you may think, oh, I've got a knee pain. But it's not, it doesn't stay static. It changes. Everything changes in the body. And I want to finish by showing you a picture. So I put a small one here on the shrine. I don't know if you can see this, and how much well you can see it online. Does anybody know who this is? She's got a name. Nearly close, but no, it's not Pranya Paramitar. She has a shorter name than that.
Oh, Tara.
Tara. It's Tara, that's right, yes. It's Tara. And the reason I wanted to show you Tara, here's another image there. Could you do me a favour and just hold it in front of the camera so that they can see it more clearly? Thank you, that's brilliant. Until your arm grows tired. Everything's impermanent, you can't hold it forever. So, in this image, she is holding flowers, bunches of flowers. So if you look in one of her hands, for example, her left hand is up here by her heart, and out of the left hand comes the stalk, and at the end of it is one flower in bud, one flower opening, and one flower in full blossom. And maybe actually in these pictures even a few more flowers. They've added extra flowers. And this is really significant. It shows, Tara is a female Buddha, a female enlightened figure, and she's holding those three lotuses to tell you, remember impermanence, remember there are buds in your life, potentialities, remember there are blossoms in your life that are there to enjoy, remember there are fully open flowers that will fall, and be aware of that. And I love that symbol of Tara. There's many other symbols with Tara, but yeah, do have a look her up if you're interested, the female Buddha Tara. So I'm going to leave it with that. I hope that's a helpful little picture in a way of impermanence, to remember the three flowers, the three roses, or the three lotuses. Okay, so we've got a few minutes now, so there is an opportunity for questions. I'm going to put the microphone on surround sound.
Ratnaprabha,
And if anyone wants to chip in from online.
can you hear us online?
Thanks for your patience online. I hope that got through.
Can you hear us online, Ratnaprabha?
Anybody got any comments or questions? Yes.
I really love several ideas that you highlighted, and I really liked the idea about linking impermanence and creativity. I was just wondering, how can you promote that even more kind of, creative mindset through accepting of impermanence? Are there any specific ideas around that?
Yes, thank you very much. So asking about, is there any creative, any ways of a mindset that can look at accepting impermanence to generate creativity? And there's one brief thing here which I could have gone into a little bit more, but that's the value of meditation, opening gaps up in your experience. So creativity, it seems to me, comes out of space, out of spaciousness. So sometimes creativity comes, you have to sleep on a problem, and the dream state will bring the problem. We'll just leave it for a while, But in a shorter sense, you need to do this with all of your experience, and realize that when something happens to you, for example, someone may say something unpleasant to you, even say something disparaging to you. And of course, your immediate feeling, probably, if you're human like me, pain, horrible. And there immediately, there may be a wish either to retaliate or to run away or to feel awful about yourself or something. So this is a good example of where, if you can, just sit with the feeling, with the experience of it, and just take it as a pure feeling, and then have some space with that. And maybe, maybe just meditate, they did say something, it really was difficult, wasn't it? That was so hard. But then, instead of thinking about it, just sit with the feeling. And then the creativity will emerge. And something maybe, for example, you start to think, but of course, if I think of what they've been through this year, and what their life is like, and what they've had to face, I can see why they're getting really crabby and tetchy, and it probably wasn't personal. It's just coming out of that mood. But it may be something even more creative, where you think, God, yeah, what I realise now is that our relationship that our communication has gone wrong a bit, and I can do something about that. And you go back to them and say something different, So that's just an example of where you just use space. I'm sure that you can probably think of other things as well, but it's worth reflecting on that. How can creativity emerge from awareness of impermanence? Thank you for that. Yeah. Any others? Yeah.
Ratnaprabha, can you hear us online?
Oh yes, we have an online one next. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Oh, great. I just actually wanted to say that if you're anything like me, then you've probably got 1,000 questions you want to ask Ratnaprabha. This is the first exploration into the first seal, and over the next few weeks, before we go on to the next talk on the second seal, we will be coming back to explore this in further detail and having discussion groups. So don't worry if your question isn't answered today. If you do have questions in regards to the first seal and impermanence and conditionality, you can come back next Saturday or the next Saturday, and we'll be exploring it further.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Jenny. That's a very good point, that we've got more weeks on it, but also this week there isn't time for us to have any discussion, but in future weeks there will be. And in a way, the best thing to do with it, rather than asking questions from some apparent expert, is to reflect on it in your real experience, and you can share that experience, yeah. We still probably have got time for it, if anyone else wants to raise anything. Oh, yes, over there, yes.
How do you what advice do you have of striking a relationship between accepting your experience and your position, and also having the will to make things better?
Yeah,
Where's the line of, not necessarily even the line, but how do you determination against acceptance. I feel like
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
sort of combat each other, and I'm not sure where.
I know what you mean. I think that's a really good point, isn't it? Determination against acceptance, or just letting go of a thing as against being assertive and making something new happen, you know.
Yeah.
And they're both valuable, aren't they? You do sometimes need to let go, but you also sometimes need to say, no, this is not acceptable, or I can see a much better option here. Let's go for it. Let's really go for it. And I think, in a way, there isn't an answer. It's like, in a way, Buddhism is full of these tensions. You know, I mentioned the tension between gaining and losing, but that's another really good example of a tension. A tension between just accepting this is what's going on, this is real. And maybe people think of Buddhists as being like that. They just sit quietly and everything washes over them and it's all wonderful. But no, you've got to intervene sometimes, haven't you? This world is not an acceptable place. Things need to be dealt with that are wrong and unjust and so on. And maybe also things need to be brought into being. Wonderful, new, creative things need to be brought into being. So I don't know how you achieve the balance, but to be aware of both of them is the place to start. You know, not to forget. When you are creating, don't forget openness and receptivity. When you're being very open and receptive, don't forget, maybe I need to act now, you know. But that's all I can really suggest. But thanks for the question. I think it's good to have that as a question, isn't it, and as an issue.